Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, graduating class, I welcome you on behalf of the trustees of the Lahore University of Management Sciences to this, the second convocation of the university. It is being presided over by the President of Pakistan, who, as Chancellor of the university, has been closely associated with its development. Today, the Lahore University of Management Sciences has invited you to participate in the ceremony during which degrees will be conferred on the third graduating class. Alhamdulillah, LUMS has made considerable progress since its first convocation 18 months ago. All its 109 graduates have secured employment in different organizations, 10 of them abroad. They seem to be making the impact we had hoped for. Their employers are wanting to hire more LUMS graduates. Some particularly enterprising graduates began their own business based upon a business plan they developed during their MBA program. I'm told they are doing extremely well. This kind of initiative is as much a tribute to the graduates themselves as to the motivating spirit provided by the faculty. As you know, LUMS has been planning to build its own campus. I'm happy to report to you, sir, that we have been given a verbal clearance by the authorities, a formal confirmation of which is awaited to enable us to commence construction. You'd be delighted to know, Your Excellency, that the foundation stone of the new campus building and the Executive Development Center was laid on 20th October this year. The plans for the academic block are complete. Tenders have been invited. The turf on the site has been broken, and inshallah, the physical construction of the main academic block, along with the infrastructure, will begin shortly. We plan to build the university campus in phases. The first phase includes the main academic block, the Executive Development Center, and student housing. These should be complete by September 1993, less than 3 years from now. Inshallah, the classes for the winter of 1993 semester will be held on the new campus. The total construction cost of the campus is anticipated to be about rupees 300 million. The cost of land is additional to this. It will be a test of our managerial skills and resources to mobilize the required funds. USAID has generously pledged $10 million towards construction of the project, and their support in this and in the initial years is gratefully acknowledged. We have had generous donations from the corporate sector, from private individuals, from aid agencies, USAID, SIDA Canada, BIT Sweden, and Konrad Adenauer Foundation of Germany. But there is one source which I wish to acknowledge separately, and that is the support of the alumni. The class of each year makes a cash donation to the scholarship fund of the university. The fund is gradually building up. In this way, a continuing link is established between the past, present, and future scholars of LUMS. We are extremely grateful and proud of this relationship. I am sure the graduating class will actively contribute in this useful and necessary association. I know that you'll be pleased to learn, as I was, that the Tetra Pak group of companies in Sweden have made a singularly generous donation of $1 million towards the planned Executive Development Center. The Rousing family, which owns Tetra Pak, have been our family friends and business partners in packages and other companies for the past 35 years. This latest contribution by them is yet another symbol of their continuing commitment to Pakistan and to its economic and managerial development. All of us at LUMS are deeply appreciative of their generous and timely contribution. And I want to thank Dr. Gard Rousing, Vice Chairman of the Tetra Pak Group of Companies, and his wife, Dr. Beget Rousing, for being with us on this important occasion. To date, LUMS has run 8 successful management development programs using the limited facilities presently available to us. The new Executive Development Center, to be named Dr. Reuben Rousing Center after the founding president of Tetra Pak, will enable us to offer these much-needed programs throughout the year. In time, with our own campus fully operational by 1995, the number of graduates from LUMS will increase to 100 per year, double its present output. Judging from the response to our graduates, we are confident they shall be received and absorbed by prospective employers with the same eagerness. We are actively exploring the possibility of setting up additional programs to enhance managerial capabilities in the country. Teaching of management information systems at the postgraduate level is one such program. We've been talking to 2 world-renowned companies who have sought their assistance in this venture. Our objective is to produce highly qualified professionals who have the technical expertise and the business skills to spearhead the efforts for development of effective business information systems. These graduates will be instrumental in development of software systems for Pakistani companies and for export. I learned, for example, that India plans to earn $1,000 million a year from the export of their software, more than they earn from textile exports. I can see no reason why Pakistan cannot be stimulated into making the same effort. We have the manpower, the energy, and the talent. All we need is the will. Another area we are considering is industrial management. Pakistan has a large and growing number of bright engineering graduates whose contribution to the country could be enhanced if they could be educated in industrial management skills. I have outlined some of the ideas which have excited us. None of these can be realized without the team effort that has gone into establishing LUMS as you see it today. The Board of Governors of the National Management Foundation and the Board of Trustees of the Lahore University of Management Sciences deserve our special thanks. The unstinting support of the governors, the trustees, and my colleagues on the management committee have combined to progress as far as we have. I am deeply indebted to them. Management is a joint task and a joint responsibility. Without the help of the management committee, my utility as a Pro-Chancellor would be minimal. Collectively, we have tried to act as the liaison between the university and its friends in the outside competitive world. The responsibility for the powerhouse of ideas within the university is the domain of the dean and his talented faculty. No university has a life separate or apart from its faculty. LUMS faculty has worked selflessly, inspired by a zeal and a sense of responsibility. Even when junior faculty members were sent abroad for higher training, the remaining members of the faculty bore more than their share of workload. They have earned and deserve our special thanks. Your Excellency, as Chancellor will, I know, want to join all of us in congratulating the graduating class of 1990 and to wish them every success in their future careers. The task before them is a monumental one. If they look upon it as just another job, they would be failing in the realization of the potential which had been nurtured over the last 2 years. We all look forward to seeing them play their role as nation builders and furthering the ideals and aims of this university. If we look to the potential of the Pakistanis with hope, we look to the achievement of present Pakistanis with pride. I refer, of course, to our distinguished guest, Mr. Moeen Qureshi, who is currently Senior Vice President Operations in the World Bank. He has traveled specially from Washington to participate in this convocation, and I now request Mr. Qureshi to deliver the keynote address. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the graduating class, I cannot but help feel a great sense of emotion as I speak to you on what is for me personally a momentous occasion. I was born in this city. This is where I went to college and where I spent some of my formative early years. The last time I spoke publicly here was some 40 years ago in an intervarsity debate. They say, you can take a person out of Lahore, but you cannot take Lahore out of the person. So it is with me. I'm very pleased and very proud to be with you here today. Friends, I've thought long of what I should say to you. I could give you bland and soothing advice on how you might choose splendid careers either here or abroad. Instead, I have decided to share with you my personal assessment of where Pakistan stands today, 43 years after its creation. What challenges lie ahead, especially for you, the younger generation of Pakistanis, as you embark on life's odyssey. In my earlier years as a student, my friends and I shared a glorious dream. That dream was based on Allama Iqbal's vision of a separate Pakistani nation. I remember as a boy going to Allama Iqbal's funeral in Lahore and being given a card which bore some verses he had written just a few hours before his death. They began, Saroz Rafta Aaz Ayat Ke Na Ayat, Nasimat Hijaz Ayat Ke Na Ayat. His words and writing, which first sounded the clarion call for the formation of Pakistan, were to us truly like an inspirational wind from Hijaz. They were rooted in the great tradition of Muslim humanism and solidarity. Thereafter, it was the indomitable will of Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah that led to the political realization of Pakistan. I remember Mr. Jinnah coming to Islamia College, Lahore, to address students in 1946. He was dressed in an immaculate white silk double-breasted suit. His message was terse: educate yourself. I recall him saying,
Do not let yourself be diverted from that task. Nothing will be more important for the new nation of Pakistan than an educated and professionally qualified group of people. His vision of Pakistan was of a modern, economically and technologically advanced, socially cohesive, open and outward-looking nation. We need to ask ourselves, to what extent have we measured up to those earlier expectations? To what extent has that dream been realized? Let us look at the balance sheet of the past 43 years' performance. On the credit side, there can be no question that Pakistan today is far more economically advanced than the predominantly rural and poverty-stricken society of 1947. It is a much more developed financial and industrial system, and social and economic conditions are clearly better than at independence. Most of the economic progress, not all, most of it can be attributed to two extended periods of economic growth. First, during the 1960s, under the leadership of President Ayub, and second, in the 1970s and early 1980s, in the earlier years of President Ziaul-Haq. For the rest, the record of economic performance has been checkered, characterized by stop-go cycles, and at times worse. On the debit side, Pakistan's economy has been weakened in recent years by structural factors which governments have been unwilling or unable to tackle resolutely and comprehensively. For a country at its stage of development, Pakistan has a very low savings rate and a dismal record of domestic resource generation for investment. Infrastructure has decayed, and some indicators, for example, education and the status of women, are reminiscent of some of the poorest African countries. As if all this were not enough, exports have failed to keep pace with our external obligations, and the balance of payments is severely strained. And in recent months, the Gulf crisis has greatly aggravated the country's economic difficulties. I regret to say that without tough action, Pakistan will undoubtedly face before long an economic crisis of great severity. Such a crisis cannot be cured by additional foreign aid, whether bilateral or multilateral. In my view, Pakistan is already excessively dependent on external assistance. Aid, especially from multilateral institutions, has a legitimate function for development. But it can easily become a crutch which inhibits raising domestic resources. In any case, there should be no doubt that Pakistan's ability to attract substantial foreign assistance will depend critically on its willingness to put its own house in order, quickly and effectively. Now let me turn to the social items on the balance sheet, where the prognosis is much more disquieting. First, I feel that the conduct of Pakistani society today is much more personalized and much less institutional than at independence. Pakistan inherited some strong institutions at its inception: a professional civil service, a respected judiciary, and a firm administration of law and order. True, these bodies were needed at that time to serve colonial purposes, and they needed to be recast to serve an independent nation rather than a colonial power. but they did provide an orderly and predictable framework for the conduct of people's lives. Since independence, however, the integrity and effectiveness of these institutions has steadily eroded, and we have failed to develop new political and economic institutions that could adequately respond to the needs of different groups in a growing, developmentally oriented society. Consequently, Pakistani society today increasingly functions within a framework of personal rather than institutional relationships. Secondly, we have become a deeply divided society, divided by religion, by sex, by place of origin, and by every other difference, imaginable or unimaginable. I find to my dismay that familial or provincial or sectarian differences are stronger rallying cries than love or tolerance of the spirit of solidarity which founded this nation. If we continue to divide by religion or by dogma, or if we continue to think of ourselves first as Sindhi, Punjabi, Pathan, or Muhajir, rather than as Pakistani, then we begin to see the writing on the wall, and it does not portend well for this country. I am reminded of the comic character Pogo, who went into battle looking for the enemy. And when he reached the battlefront, he shouted, "We have found the enemy, and it is us." Third, we've become a violent society. When I grew up, the stray incident of violence, mostly in the villages, and mostly related to conflicts over women, property, or livestock, was big news in the papers. It was quite unlike today, when firearms are freely available, and a few citizens can take the law into their own hands and impose their will on others, when the resolution of disputes through violence has become commonplace, and organized thuggery can go virtually unnoticed. You, Mr. President, recently gave us some frightening figures on the loss of life caused by ethnic violence in Sindh province. The point is not just that people should not live in fear of violence. The point is also that a society cannot devote itself seriously to development if it is consumed by violence. Fourth, we have become a society which is beset by deep social ills. The most serious threat to social stability is the growing drug addiction. Its ravages should not be minimized. They go far beyond a threat to public health standards. In countries such as Colombia, drugs threaten the very foundations of democratic government. I am also dismayed that little social stigma attaches any longer to bribery and corruption. They appear to have become more or less acceptable as a way of life. Not so long ago, the strongest deterrent against corruption in public life was the fear of ostracism from one's peers or friends rather than the fear of criminal punishment. Maintaining standards of social morality is a far more fitting subject for public debate than arcane issues of religious dogma and sectarianism. Fifth, we have become a confused society, confused about our past, but even more confused about our future. The history of Pakistan's political evolution, in which the army and civil service have been leaders, was understandably controversial about the type of government the country should establish. On the economic side, Pakistan's founding fathers failed to elaborate any clear approach to economic management. On societal issues, Pakistanis seem more preoccupied with questioning their neighbors' conscience and religious beliefs than with worrying about the moral and social standards that should govern everyone's behavior. This confusion cannot be dispelled by merely harping back to models that existed long ago and endeavoring to replicate them without change under the very different conditions of today. These problems can be resolved only by responding to the problems of today with solutions that are equally contemporary. Consistency with the spirit and tenets of Islam is hardly, if ever, a problem, because Islam is a religion about life, not abstraction. It recognizes and accepts change, and its principles have a universal character. Confronted by the confusion and the chaos of the present, I detect a tendency among some Pakistanis to live in the past and to romanticize it, to look at the mausoleums of the dead and to talk nostalgically about the ancient glories of bygone Muslim empire. कोई करतबा के खंडर जाके देखे, हिजाजी अमीरों के घर जाके देखे. Certainly the past yields its lessons. But what bears more reflection is not the glories of Islam in the 7th or the 8th century, or the Muslim Renaissance in Spain and North Africa some 800 years later, or even the splendor of the Ottoman Empire not so long ago, but the causes of their decline. And make no mistake, some of the same signs of a house divided, which we see in Pakistan today, led to the disintegration of those glorious ancient regimes. For this reason, if for no other, we must confront present reality. And it is in many ways a tough reality. We must come to terms with it and begin building for the future. As we look to the future, Pakistan again enjoys a great opportunity. The country has the prospect of political stability under a democratically elected government with a mandate for 5 years. Mr. President, no future historian could ignore your personal contribution to helping to re-establish democratic government and the rule of law in the country. It remains for the elected representatives of the people to undertake the comprehensive economic and social reforms essential to restoring national cohesion and sustainable economic growth. The new government, in my view, has two major national responsibilities. One, as I have suggested, is to tackle serious economic problems which could deteriorate into a crisis if left unattended. The other is to provide good governance. What do I mean by good governance? To begin with, I mean less government, especially in the economic and social field. For Britain, Mrs. Thatcher defined it as a change from a dependent to a self-reliant society, from a give it to me to a do-it-yourself nation. It means more delegation and decentralization of authority, from central government to provincial government, from provincial governments to local bodies, and from local bodies to non-governmental and community organizations. The approach in the 1990s must be for the people to take tighter hold of their own destiny and to reduce their dependence on government. Good government also means tolerant government, tolerant of differences in political, religious, and sectional beliefs, and of personal conflicts. It means a government that respects dissent, protects the independence of the judiciary, and ensures that justice is done. Good governance means an open government, a government that preserves and protects free speech and a free press, and is subject to free public discussion. Such public discussion requires institutions that can inform the people and help them reach rational judgment. Unfortunately, this is not always possible in Pakistan. Our mosques no longer function as madrasas. Our schools and colleges have in some cases become centers of political agitation instead of learning, and independent citizens' institutions and channels of communication are few in number. In addition, good governance means compassionate government. Government that is genuinely committed to improving the lot of the poor. Someone once said, poverty is not made by God. Poverty is made by you and me. While Pakistan has made progress in alleviating the worst of poverty, there continue to be severe problems of infant mortality, low life expectancy, and a very low literacy rate. These require a renewed effort to promote social sector development, and particularly to bring women more directly into development. Finally, I mean a government that is prepared to govern when it needs to govern. It must not flinch from taking hard decisions to stimulate national renewal. Fundamental economic reforms to stave off the economic crisis that looms ahead. The reinforcement of law and order and of due process to ensure that justice is done without fear or favor, and the fostering of institutions needed for good governance. This, in my view, is the agenda for good governance before the democratically elected new leader. At the top of the agenda is the need to heal and bind up the wounds of the nation, not deepen them. This is a time to recognize that political opposition is a positive part of democracy. No matter how rancorous the past, it is for those in power to stretch out the hand of conciliation and invite all Pakistanis, including those in opposition, to join hands in a spirit of national consensus and deal with the urgent threats to our country's well-being and solidarity. What must be done? Pakistan must boldly implement structural reforms that will shift economic and social management increasingly to the private sector and to non-governmental organizations of the people. It is the people who are and should be the beginning and the end of development, governmental or private. More than ever before, developing human resources and strengthening Pakistani institutions, political, social, and economic, ought to be one of the new government's most pressing priorities. Experience in the developing world over the last half-century provides incontrovertible evidence that well-motivated proponents of development have been overzealous in expanding the role of state in economic affairs. This has brought about an excessive centralization of decision-making, greatly inflated the bureaucracy, and stifled the private sector. Pakistan is no exception to this general trend. In this over-regulated environment, the private sector has also not behaved responsibly. It has tended to evade laws and regulations rather than observe them. This must change. The business of government is to provide the right environment for other businesses, not to manage them. Winston Churchill once said, "Some see private enterprise as a predatory target to be shot. Others see a cow to be milked. But few are those who see it as a sturdy horse pulling the wagon. It is this sturdy horse that must now be harnessed to the national wagon." I suggest formulating a social contract which will facilitate these structural reforms. A social contract would spell out the rights and duties of the state and the rights and duties of the groups which constitute Pakistan. A social contract would underpin a national consensus derived from understandings between the center and the provinces, and between the provinces and local bodies, between business and the government, between landlords and tenants. Given the political reality in Pakistan, the armed forces must also be part of the social contract. The crux is that without consensus, without institutions, it will be much harder to secure the revenue and investment essential for long-term development, especially social development. This is a fitting occasion for me to pay a tribute to Syed Babar Ali for his personal contribution in demonstrating how an enlightened private sector can be a vibrant force for development. He is the true architect of LUMS, and through perseverance and a sense of commitment, he has translated the glimmer of an idea into a high-quality national institution. The private sector and community organizations should be strongly encouraged to establish similar institutions in other disciplines, in natural sciences, medicine, economics, and computer science. Some of the finest educational institutions in North America are funded by endowments from public-spirited citizens and private institutions rather than handouts from the government. Pakistan cannot remain isolated from the rest of the world. Pakistan cannot be a small island in an ocean of change. Pakistan needs the rest of the world and needs it desperately. It needs markets, technology, and most important of all, recognition as a responsible and responsive state making its full contribution to a peaceful and prosperous community of nations. A Chinese proverb says, "It is more useful to stand before a window than before a mirror." It means that a person who stands before a mirror tends to look only at himself or herself, whereas the man at the window looks at the world outside and is therefore better able to see his place and role in life. Many of you here today stand at the threshold of new careers and new professional responsibilities. I hope you too will look outward and rise above the parochialism and prejudices that have stifled initiative in the past and curtailed national solidarity. And that brings me back to what Qaid-e-Azam had to say to the students on the summer day in 1946. The more we analyze the process of development, the more we begin to understand the central role of education in building a vibrant and growing society. It is the quality of human resources and of institutions, and there is a very close link between the two, which nurtures nations. We should see the contribution of an institution such as the Lahore University of Management Sciences in that respect. It is as we move into the 1990s, it is clear that Pakistan's economic prospects will depend heavily on unleashing the entrepreneurial talents of people in productive activities, in agriculture, in industry, and in commerce. We are too small and too underdeveloped a nation to expect to generate this growth entirely from within. A large part of it must come through business and trade with the outside world. It is essential, therefore, that Pakistan develops management and technical skills to use efficiently the scarce domestic and external capital that becomes available. We are living in a world in which old political and economic systems are changing rapidly. Our world is moving towards economic liberalization and more open trading systems. Technological change is affecting all aspects of production and marketing. Increasingly, production for world markets will require innovation and skill-intensive solutions to ensure competitiveness. The potential contribution of institutions such as LUMS to equipping a new generation of Pakistanis to perform these tasks will be immense. The generation that struggled for the creation of Pakistan is rapidly fading away. You, the youth of this country, are the guardians of its future. As a nation of immigrants, we in Pakistan are a melting pot of many people, many cultures, and many religions. You must rediscover the pride that we once felt in the rich tapestry of this country's regional and cultural differences, and be the technicians of a new renaissance that illumines it with the spirit of tolerance and love for our common heritage. We must all learn to live together, or we will perish together. The ideals which the founders of Pakistan sought are as valid today as they were half a century ago. I believe it was Saint Exupéry who said that ideals are like stars. We may never reach them, but like mariners on the sea, we can chart our course, and I might say the course of the nation by them. In the days when we struggled for Pakistan, the students frequently recited a verse. न समझोगे तो मिट जाओगे ऐ हिंदी मुसलमानों, तुम्हारी दास्तां तक भी न होगी दास्तानों. Mr. President, I firmly believe that today one can substitute the word Pakistani for Hindi and it would be equally relevant. I am confident that all of you here, our current leaders, and you, the graduating class, whom I consider to be the next generation of this nation's leaders, will provide the enlightened leadership and good governance that will bring Pakistan closer to fulfilling the dreams we all had half a century ago. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmadu wa nusalli ala Rasulihil Kareem. Governor of the Punjab, Mia Muhammad Azhar, Chief Minister, Mr. Ghulam Ishaq Khan, Pro-Chancellor, Syed Babar Ali, Rector, Mr. Razak Dawood, Dean, Dr. Wasim Azhar, and the distinguished guests who gave a very illuminating keynote address, and my old friend, the Senior Vice President of the World Bank, Dr. Moeen Qureshi. Members of the faculty, members of the graduating class, parents, ladies and gentlemen. Coming to LUMS once again, to me, is what can be called Kande Mukarrar. It is indeed a pleasure to be able personally to congratulate another group of young men and women graduating after successfully running the arduous and demanding course of business administration. The degree that received today is no ordinary degree. It bears the insignia of an institution which has in a short span of time come to symbolize the realization of the concept of excellence in education in a developing country, and has earned not only the approbation but also the gratitude of the business community. It is heartening to hear once again the Dean and the Pro-Chancellor speak in such confident and enthusiastic terms about the university achievements and prospects. I share their enthusiasm. Knowing my good friend Babar Ali, it may not be entirely in keeping with his ingrained humility to talk of his management venture in terms bordering on what I may venture to call the arrogance of excellence. But I also know that modesty is not among the virtues of modern management. And together with Firaq Guru Puri, the modern manager has to hard sell himself. Qadr apni firaq ab kar lo, khud satayish binagar gun na rahe. Resort to poetry so early in a discourse on management to prove a point sounds a little odd. But it should not come as a surprise to those who know the latest trend in management studies, emphasizing the understanding of the business world through literature. One of the elective courses for MBA students in Harvard is in moral and social inquiry through fiction, which is seen as a means of personal philosophical reflection, as an instrument of social and cultural observation, as a source of moral energy, and as a means of understanding the intricate and complex dimensions of human relations. After all, as is said, management is not an aggregation of a number of major activities, of which one is human relations. Management is human relations. Members of the graduating class, you have been the fortunate recipients of quality education in a discipline which has become synonymous with modern business and is in such wide demand that it has captured the imagination of even conservative universities like Cambridge and Oxford. You must be knowing that Cambridge has already set up an Institute of Management Studies, where the first MBA students are to begin studies from October next. Oxford, too, is to follow in the footprints of its traditional rival. Quality education is certainly an asset in itself, but academic excellence by itself is no substitute for commitment that inspires one to put to practice the knowledge he has. That inspires one to put to practice the knowledge he has, commitment not only to the organization he serves, but to the society he belongs. As students, you are probably taught to treat business enterprise as primarily existing by and for itself. There may have been stress in your studies on relations to the outside, to the individuals and institutions which constitute the environment. But society is not just the environment of the enterprise, it is its own. As Peter Drucker argues, even the most private of private enterprise is an organ of society and serves a social function. Indeed, the very nature of modern business enterprise imposes responsibilities on the manager which are different in kind and scope from those of yesterday's businessmen, who was guided solely by the traditional concept of private property and individual good. He found it conveniently to his own advantage to work under the assumption that the self-interest of the owner of private property will automatically lead to collective good. Today's business requires of the manager that he also assumes social responsibility for the public good, that he subordinates his actions to an ethical standard of conduct, and that he restrains his self-interest and limits the power of his organization wherever its exercise is likely to infringe upon the common weal. The public responsibility of management must therefore underline all its behavior. It is basically this responsibility that furnishes the ethics of management. Fortunately for us, the Islamic society has a well-defined, divinely ordained code of ethics, encompassing all spheres of human activity. In such a society, business enterprise and their managers must not aspire to live on isolated islands, cut off from the mainland, practicing only borrowed values and imported morality. They must not lose sight of Islam's economic doctrine, which is woven around the unitary concept of human life, in which material and spiritual aspects are so blended as to form an indivisible whole. This integration makes ethics the touchstone of propriety for man's economic behavior and has a fundamental bearing on the entire spectrum of a society's economic activity, namely production, distribution, and consumption. It makes production welfare-oriented, distribution justice-oriented, and consumption balance-oriented, with the rights of the underprivileged specially protected. It encourages individuals' economic pursuits, but sublimates them with considerations of collective good and moral consistency. As Muslims, we are bound by these values, and the behavior of managers in an Islamic society has conformed to the standards they denote and the requirements they imply. Then there are cultural norms, social values, and circumstantial compulsions which are typically Pakistani. In combination with our spiritual moorings, they constitute a socio-economic mosaic which resembles neither the American scene nor the Japanese scenario, which are considered to be amongst the most successful economic systems. It is what we call the Pakistani culture. It is in this cultural environment in which you have to operate. I do not mean to suggest that you should discard the management practices of the developed economies. What I wish to emphasize is that even while practicing them, you must not try to act as foreigners to the land you belong and to the people you manage. As was observed by the late Takeo Fujosa, the co-founder of Honda, and I quote, Japanese and American management practices are 95% the same, and yet they differ in all important respects. The emphasis is in all important respects. The explanation is obviously to be found in the vast difference in their cultural background, which at times makes even their business interaction a dialogue of the deaf. Difference in management patterns due to cultural differences is perhaps best illustrated by the example of Mazda and Chrysler. When both faced the common threat of bankruptcy in the early 80s, Mazda viewed its workforce as an asset, and instead of cutting jobs, its managers agreed to a 25% salary cut and forfeited bonuses for 4 years. Chrysler, in contrast, cut its blue-collar workforce by 28%, its white-collar staff by 7%, and its executive pay by only 2 to 10%. And is, I believe, perhaps for that reason, still not out of the woods. My purpose is not to compare the American and Japanese management scene, but only to stress the point that if business practices in two societies at almost identical level of development are at such great variance, how can managers of a developing country having very different socio-economic backgrounds and working under very different conditions afford to blindly emulate their Western model and hope to succeed? They have to indigenize the management practices to suit local genius, to respond to local needs, and to realize local aspirations and expectations. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, what Babar Ali is doing at LUMS, Pakistanizing Harvard in Lahore. This requirement assumes added relevance and urgency in the present context. Self-reliance has been adopted as the real measure of economic progress in the new dispensation. Self-reliance in resources, self-reliance in technology and know-how, and self-reliance in management. The government believes that no nation living on other generosity can be called free in the real sense. Economic and technological dependence eats into the very vital of political independence. If we are to safeguard our freedom, we will have to throw away the borrowed crutches, put some lead into our knees, and stand on our own feet. It may hurt in the beginning. The start may also be wobbly, but the momentary difficulty will probably be much less distressful and certainly much more honorable than the perpetual agony of living at the mercy of shifting moods and changing priorities of those who are seldom bothered by the qualms of conscience in demanding their pound of flesh. At any rate, as I had recently said in another context, we cannot enter the 21st century confidently, riding on others' shoulders. Government is therefore determined to introduce far-reaching and substantial changes, much in line with what our distinguished guest told you in his keynote address. These changes will be in its economic policies. It has opted for a development strategy that is pragmatic and practicable, a strategy that has the promise of setting into motion an industrial revolution by freeing to the extent possible private initiative from restrictive regulations and eliminating the silver wheels on which industrial sanctions were perceived to move. Deregulation and privatization are among the basic ingredients of the government recipe for a quantum leap forward. Some steps of wide import have already been announced. A lot more is to come, intended at releasing the tremendous potential that lies locked in the private sector's hitherto dampened spirits and stifled initiative. That means a whole new set of challenges and a whole new burden of responsibilities which the private sector will be obligated to face boldly and discharge with a sense of indebtedness to the society. These opportunities, these challenges and responsibilities bring in their wake expectations of a large vision, greater dynamism, and a spirited dash on the part of the management cadres, which too will have to make self-reliance the holy grail. Pakistan confronts the highly sophisticated business world of 21st century with a weak organizational network, lacking the requisite expertise and not showing much signs of preparing for the future. If our business wishes to survive and prosper in tomorrow's intricately globalized market environment, it will have to come out of the narrow confines of the domestic market and, remaining anchored in a strong sense of national identity, develop an international consciousness and outlook so as to become an integral part of the global economic hub. Business was never an isolated national activity. From the Phoenicians of the ancient world and the medieval traders, trade and business have always cut across frontiers and enlarged horizons of national thinking and culture. But the rapid globalization of the world, especially in the 80s, has put unusual strains and demands upon the approach with which business has to be conducted. Unless our private sector learns to face these strains and meet these demands by resorting on a large scale to professional management, it will not be able to keep pace with the world market where competition does not always move within the civilized grooves of cooperation, as is presently being demonstrated by the persistent deadlock in the Uruguay round of GATT. The entrepreneur and the manager have to work overtime to make the best of inadequate resources in an imperfect world, which is what management is all about. Contrary to the general belief, the imperfections in which business operates are also accentuated by advances in technology. In Pakistan, we are faced with the simultaneous phenomena of a burgeoning labor force due to rapid population growth and labor redundancy, resulting, among others, from the modernization of industry and agriculture. Then there are the heightened expectations of the city and farm dwellers, bred by a degree of modern consciousness that is the gift of the information explosion. This consciousness, which is a positive measure of social development, manifests itself in demands of more rights, higher wages, better working conditions, and greater facilities. These aspects will have to be taken serious care of by today's managers, together with raising efficiency and productivity levels in a disciplined environment. Another national obligation of the managerial cadres in the change time is to redefine their attitude towards the job of managing people under them. It is an age of enlightenment, of democratic rights, of human dignity, and this age demands that managers take as their guiding principle what is so aptly put by Parkinson, and I quote, "You can buy a man's time. You can buy a man's physical presence at a given time. You can even buy a measured number of skilled muscular motions per hour. But you cannot buy enthusiasm. You cannot buy initiative. You cannot buy loyalty. You cannot buy the devotion of hearts, minds and souls. You have to earn these. And the real secret of earning these is to build up a reputation for dedication and sincerity. People turn in the end to a man they have learned to trust." I am confident that the education imparted and mental grooming done at this university by such a distinguished faculty has equipped you well with the requisite knowledge, rational thought, professional skills, and the right kind of attitude to acquit yourself honorably in the highly challenging and ruthlessly competitive world that lies outside the friendly environs of this institution. The world is in many ways cold and harsh. You will need all the intellectual energy and moral strength to carve a niche out there for yourselves. And you will have to keep learning. Your academic education is neither the beginning of the world nor its end. Practical life is a better teacher than anyone you know, and making a place in society is a tougher test than the others you have taken. The key to success is nothing other than what, and I regret to have to say, is fast becoming a rarity in our society, hard work. I know the intensely hard work you have done to earn your degree. Your exacting work and single-minded devotion must have generated an inner strength in you and created a capacity for endurance. From this, you will be able to give in abundance of yourselves to Pakistan, which it eagerly awaits. I am glad we have men and women of your potential in our midst. We need every ounce of that potential. My congratulations to you once again and my best wishes for your success. Pakistan, Paindar.